Canada and the right to housing legislation, influencing policy with social media. I thought we already had legislation. Canada already has a National Housing Strategy, or NHS, that is committed to progressively developing and implementing a human rights-based approach to housing in Canada. Housing First, or ICM, is actively housing people and has been doing so without legislation. The 20,000 Homes campaign has already housed more than 20,000 homeless people and did it without legislation. So why do we need legislation? Without it, there is no guarantee of housing to accommodate our vulnerable populations like single parents or disabled, Indigenous peoples, children, mental health, immigrants or refugees, or LGBTQ. Well, how does legislation guarantee this? Currently, people are being housed according to the National Housing Strategy. However, many hard-to-house people will fall through the cracks. Some examples could be a disabled person who has issues with mobility will need accessible housing. If all the accessible housing is filled, how can this person be housed? Who will guarantee the availability of more accessible housing? Or possibly, an individual living with severe mental health is being released from a hospital stay. Hospital staff are unable to find immediate supportive housing as all the group homes are full, and there is a 4-year waiting list. Without legislation, how can we, the people, hold our government accountable to provide more supportive housing? If housing is legislated as a human right, then the government can be held accountable for its promises to fix housing for all people. What does the Declaration of Human Rights actually say about housing? And how does that relate to Canada? Article 25, Part 1 of the Declaration of Human Rights states, "Everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and of his family." Well, what does adequate standard of living mean? To be adequate, housing must have legal security of tenure, in other words, can't be evicted for no reason, availability of services, materials, facilities, and infrastructure, must have access to sewers and plumbing and garbage pickup, must be affordable, must have habitability, meaning it can't have black mold all over the place or have pest problems. Must have accessibility, meaning it needs to be accessible to all people, including people with low mobility. Needs to have a good location, meaning that it's able to access bus systems, grocery stores, schools, banks. And cultural adequacy means that there needs to be a variety of housing available for people of different cultures. But how does this relate to Canada? Canada has ratified several treaties that support and agree with the right to housing. Canada has also been told by the UN Special Rapporteurs that compliance with the right to adequate housing under international human rights law requires not only consistent policies and programs to implement the right to adequate housing, but also the development of a legal and institutional framework for the protection of the right and for the provision of effective remedies for those whose rights have been violated. But despite this, Canada has still not made the right to housing a legislative item. And the picture here at the bottom of the older woman is saying if we had a right to housing, if it was legislated, the federal government would have to build the houses. We need pressure on them to do that. Influence Canada's government to legislate housing as a right in the National Housing Strategy. I want you to join me by using social media to do the influencing. Why social media? Well, social media gets the message out quickly. People receive the information almost instantly. Social media is influential. How many of us can say we haven't heard of fake news thanks to it being blasted over Twitter? Or the last American election. Social media played a huge part in influencing who people voted for. Social media is not a time-consuming activity for the advocator. With a simple click of a mouse, we are able to send information. For busy people, like students, we can still contribute to causes we believe in without expending a huge amount of time and energy. Social media has a huge audience of people that we can help influence by providing accurate information. In fact, in 2017, 2.46 billion people used social media worldwide. Social media can target people who are already informed about a subject as well as those who are uninformed. Social media can potentially give us access to people who are more influential than us. For example, if a celebrity or a well-liked politician picks up our cause, the cause is sent out to the influential individual's large contact list. Social media can be used by the people housing legislation would affect the most, giving them a voice. Mackenzie and Wharf state promising advocacy efforts may include media advocacy to promote a particular understanding of the problem and a preferred solution. So the problem is that housing rights are not guaranteed without legislation to enforce it. The top right-hand corner, the yellow picture there, Al Weeb, who is actually a person part of an organization called Canadian Lived Experience Advisory Council, meaning it's made up of people who have lived experience of homelessness, says, people like me become homeless because of gaps in the system. The right to housing won't make a difference if it doesn't enable us to close those gaps and give us a voice in the process. So basically, right to housing won't make a difference if we don't have legislation to back it up and be able to hold the government accountable. The group NHS, so National Housing Strategy, socialrights.ca, has been working to bring awareness of the problem and hold the Canadian government accountable. They identify themselves as a community of people advocating for the right to housing to be included in the National Housing Strategy legislation. This group has been actively petitioning the government for housing legislation to be created, which was actually supposed to happen in autumn of 2018. They are building momentum to make this a campaign issue in Canada's next federal election in October 2019. They have written an open letter to the government, which several high-profile people and organizations have signed. They've also drafted potential legislation and a letter individuals can use to send to their MLA. If you agree every person deserves the right to adequate housing and that legislation is needed to hold our government accountable, you can help by sending a pre-written letter to your MLA. All you need to do is add your name and address. Easy. Signing the open letter to the government. Influential. Using the social media platforms that are shown on this page to get the word out. Tell your social media contacts why Canada needs right to housing legislation. You have a huge audience. You can see the National Housing Strategy Social Rights.ca webpage at this link here at the top. That's their whole webpage. There is a pre-written letter that you can sign and send to your MLA if you follow just that click there. In it, you just enter in your name, your address, and the letter is pre-written, pre-formed, and it's easy to send. It's just a click of a button. You can also follow the next link to sign the open letter, which is to be sent to Mr. Trudeau himself. They also encourage you to like, follow, and share their posts on Twitter and Facebook. And make sure to hashtag legislateR2H or @legislateR2H if you are using Facebook. And some of the visuals that you've seen in this presentation are also on their webpage. They have several of them. They're free to use, and you're encouraged to use them to download and to share the message. So if you are interested in any of those are available there too. Thank you for using social media to influence policy.